Welcome to Think Property Club's Think Tank, where we connect, share, and learn the tips and hacks from our specialists. They become part of our A team, supporting us to create the best developments in the property game. Hi guys, welcome to today's Think Property Club webinar. It's a very special webinar today. I've got one of our specialists who's the first person I contact when we're looking at a potential site or property deal to make sure we're on the right path at the beginning of the journey. So I hope you guys all have your lunch or your coffee or something you can sit down and really tune in, because you're going to get some really gold nuggets of information. And today we're honing in on Gold Coast development opportunities. I know you guys are all around Australia, and it's really important to know that when you're on this property journey, you don't need to be developing or doing deals just in your backyard. Jason and I have done deals all around Australia, and we still continue to, because we look at areas where there's good opportunities. Gold Coast is highlighted in one of our backyard areas. It's one of the areas that has the fastest growth. And today I've got Josh from Urban Strategies. Some of you might have seen Josh on our webinars before. He's been really helpful with our community of students and helped a lot of them get profitable deals across the line too with the town planning. So he's going to share some really important information on how that area is going to have that extreme growth over the next couple of years and what's being changed. So you're hearing the information before really it even gets out into the mainstream industry. And this is what you want to find out. Information about zoning or creation of opportunities in those areas. So welcome, Josh. Thank you for coming on today and sharing your knowledge and giving our community some insight into how they can tap into that growth before everybody else does.
No worries. Should I just dive straight in?
Yeah, please introduce yourself, dive straight in. For those who have questions, please put it in the chat. We're going to have an opportunity for our Think Property Club students to ask questions and ask at the end. So please write them down, put in the chat, and we'll get onto that later on.
Perfect. All right, we'll start off then, shall we, Amy? So just first, before I start introducing myself, I just point out, like, the purpose of this presentation, as Amy's kind of touched on it already, it's just to demonstrate the opportunity that you might have down on the Gold Coast. I actually prepared this presentation for some developers who are looking to do some work down here. We've done a couple of jobs with some of them already. So I've presented that to them, and this has kind of given me the opportunity to kind of refine it a little bit more and focus a bit more on that smaller, medium infill development that you guys would probably want to focus on in your development journey. The first thing I'll show you is this quote, very important, and I'll touch on it in a bit more detail later. This has come directly from the new Southeast Queensland Regional Plan, which essentially guides all the future development for local government areas in Southeast Queensland. It is anticipating quite a large population growth within the Gold Coast, which requires a further 160,000 dwellings. This is not something that is new to what the shaping SEQ plans would show. It's a lot more than what was expected 10 years ago. And I imagine that this number itself actually is probably going to increase within the next 10 years as well. So regardless, it's still showing that there is quite an opportunity down on the Gold Coast in particular because of this required growth.
Josh, how do we measure in the next 5 to 10 years how many people will be coming in?
Well, that quote there is for the next 25 years. That's the next 25 years. That what I'm saying is that number, I think, will actually be a bit more when that 25 years is up. I think it would actually be a bit more than that, because it was a couple of years ago when they first quoted it at 150,000. So I think you can see it's just a general rule. It's probably going to increase a bit more, as we move along. That's at the moment.
It's a big number and a lot of dwellings to build.
Yeah, exactly. And the dwelling is, that's a one apartment unit, that's one duplex, that's one house. That's a lot when you kind of put it into context. It's a lot that's required. And, when you put that into perspective of the entire of Australia, it's a lot that's needed.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'll touch on myself now just briefly, just to give you some background. So I am a town planner. I know a lot of you know what that is. essentially providing that advice to developers on land and managing development applications for them. I started at Urban Strategies in 2018 while I was still studying at the University of Queensland, and eventually signed on with Urban Strategies as a consultant and stayed there for a few years. In 2022, I was offered a senior position at Urbis, which is one of the larger firms in Australia. I mean, given you guys are all around Australia, you probably have heard of them. They've got offices pretty much everywhere. I was working in their Gold Coast office for 2 years, exclusively working on Gold Coast projects and focusing on, medium to high-rise residential projects around surfers and the southern beaches of the Gold Coast. In May of this year, I was approached again by Urban Strategies, who wanted to open up an office down here on the Gold Coast. That's our office there in Surfers Paradise. Because we've had a lot of work down here for a couple of years, and it just makes sense for us now to have an office here and a permanent planner. So that's my role at the moment, is being the permanent planner here on the Gold Coast and growing and getting more work for us that we've already got. Obviously, we've done a lot around here in the past 20 years or so. And Strategies itself is actually the oldest planning company in Queensland that hasn't been bought out by someone else. We were established in 1989 and have continued doing that work within Queensland and New South Wales as well. As I said, we've been on the Gold Coast now for quite a while, and now that we've got that permanent space, we're trying to expand a little bit more. This is an idea of some of the projects that we've done in the past. We try to maintain a very broad range of work that we do. A lot of companies might kind of focus on one sort of development or just a small range. We do basically anything from that smaller duplex development to those large high-rise developments for the larger developers. There's a couple of examples here, which I've just shown on the screen. So they include a couple of like medium and high density residential jobs in Service and Palm Beach. I think the one we're probably getting recognised for at the moment is one you might not expect. This image here is 10 Goodwood Terrace in Burleigh Heads, which some of you might have heard of. It recently won Development of the Year at the UDA Awards. So this is on top of Burleigh Hill. It was a 4-story apartment building that we got approved for Spire Group, one of the larger developers in Southeast Queensland. And it also set the record for the most expensive apartment in Queensland. The penthouse sold, I think, for $25 million last year. So yeah, that's just the idea of the work that we do. There's a lot of variety in what we do, and we can focus on the smaller stuff, which doesn't get noticed as much. We are working a lot on that larger and more recognizable projects as well, given the experience that we have, obviously being an old firm, and also doing that greenfield townhouse sort of projects as well, those larger sites, large subdivisions, that sort of thing. So it just gives you an idea of like the work that we do. Personally, the jobs on this list here, you see that 26 Vista Street was one that I did in Surfers, 50-story apartment building. And then I also did the one on the Gold Coast Highway in Palm Beach for medium density development as well. I'll get into a bit more. We'll give you some examples later so you guys can have a look. That's just a general idea of what we do. I'll get into the nitty gritty now of the presentation. The first thing I'm going to touch on is this Shaping SEQ, which is the regional plan for Southeast Queensland. So that's essentially everything from Noosa down to the Gold Coast and some outer regions as well, like Toowoomba and Scenic Rim. This plan essentially guides the vision for development for this entire region. So all of the city plans and the planning schemes use this as a base when they're being created. So what this update did last year was essentially explain to everyone, following the state's research, where they see people moving, where they see growth being required. And the Gold Coast obviously was included in this, being its own council area. And this is where that number comes from in terms of the population growth being nearly 400,000 people. And we're now needing more development as well. What I thought was interesting in this presentation from the state government was that they anticipate a lot of this development to be in what's called gentle density. So gentle density is this gradual incremental approach to development that's incorporated within the larger scheme of development so that there's not these abrupt changes in scale that would disrupt existing communities. So it's essentially making sure that, these areas that were predominantly houses don't turn into gigantic apartment buildings where they're not needed. This definition has also kind of been changed within the regional plan itself, where it used to refer to buildings that had like a 2-story height limit. It's now included 3 stories as well. So this is the guide for these future plans. This is not adopted as of yet, just to make that clear. The current definition still of low-rise is 1 to 2 stories. What it's showing us is that future council areas will probably increase this, which creates a bit more opportunity in terms of the developments that you can provide. And within the Gold Coast particularly, this gentle density is probably going to be done in the form of dual occupancies in smaller apartment buildings, townhouses, that sort of thing, which, as we'll touch on, actually has quite a large area in which that can occur. Generally speaking, these areas will be low density residential and medium density residential areas that we'll touch on. The main area in which this consolidation will occur is probably going to be in high density residential areas, but there's still this massive need for this gentle density for what's called the life cycle. Not everyone wants to live in an apartment building. Some people want to live in a duplex. They have kids, they have families. We don't have that available for people at the moment. So it's actually quite high in demand. And this is probably the area I reckon that the opportunity is presenting itself. So this is reflected also within the current city plan. So I just touched on this earlier. This statement at the top is from the previous regional plan. So it said 130,000 new dwellings. Obviously, it's more than that now. It's probably going to be a bit more in the future. What this statement is recognizing is that the Gold Coast as a whole is not going to expand outwards. It's limited in that opportunity because of the way that the topography is and the existing constraints. That includes, koala habitat, bushfire hazards, flooding, all that sort of thing. Gold Coast Council is very aware that we can't just keep building out and destroying vegetation. It's not going to work. Koalas are protected. Now they're federally protected. It's a very big issue in Queensland in general. So we've essentially come to the point now where we understand that, around 2/3 of development is going to be in consolidation areas, which are existing developed areas. It's just a matter of intensifying the development that's there. So council essentially sees this land as, the main areas being like Main Beach, Surfers Paradise, Broadbeach, Mermaid Beach, and then essentially like all of the southern beaches going out to Coolangatta, because these are the areas that kind of focus on low density, medium and high density residential zoning. And that's this area here. So I've just kind of circled that there. This image is from the city plan, and it's essentially like a cross section of what council expects the city to look like in terms of built form. This is from the current city plan. I think the new city plan will change it. This is just a highlighting the area in which it's probably focusing this gentle density on in the southern beaches.
Yeah, I love the word, how you said it's intensifying development in a gentle.
I mean, it's hard to say that. Yeah, people hear intense development and they get a bit scared and all that stuff. I think people forget development is this very broad range of outcomes.
Right.
Yeah,
it can be silly.
Literally, yeah. If you've done renovations to your house, you've done development. It's the same thing.
100%. Because for us as small to medium developers here, it creates opportunities where we might not be able to dive into those high scale apartment projects. This is where, your average family or mum or dad or someone starting out can get into doing a small development.
Exactly. So we're looking at now, like what zones in particular would we anticipate this density increase in? Generally speaking, all your residential zones, you could also expect it in the mixed use zone. You could expect it in centre zones as well, where they anticipate some kind of housing. Obviously, what you guys would probably want to focus on is low density residential, medium density residential. Those high density residential zone sites are very expensive for a very good reason. Obviously, you can then do a larger, intense type of development. So remainder of this presentation, we're just going to focus on low and medium density residential zones and like the key differences between the Gold Coast and other LGAs in Southeast Queensland, and like what the opportunity arises because of that. So first up, we'll just go through our low density residential zone. Very common zone you'll see in many different LGAs around Australia, not just Queensland, and is that sort of bread and butter first sort of residential zone you'd see. Generally speaking, these zones cater for your typical dwelling houses in a lot of areas. On the Gold Coast in particular, that's no different. It does still cater primarily for dwelling houses. The opportunity is there for dual occupancies and multiple dwellings where they occur in these low concentrations, having a gentle scattered effect around the neighbourhood within that zone. In particular, the Gold Coast expects these just on sites with 2 frontages. So you like typical corner lot. This is a good example. So this image I've got here, and I just found this randomly, by the way. Like I just kind of zoomed in on this and just found it. Like that's how you can find it. They are quite abundant on the Gold Coast in terms of these corner lots. So if you find something with a dual frontage, that's very beneficial. Or it doesn't have to have a dual frontage. If it's also located within the overlay for residential density. So this is a particular layer within the city plan that demonstrates which areas are earmarked for future increases in density. So if you have a site in the low density residential zone that happens to have a dual frontage or is within this overlay or both, then it is a better indication that you can actually get more out of the site and try and develop it a bit more. Generally speaking, you want to look for sites from 600 square meters or more within these density categories or on this corner lot, because the reason you want it on a corner lot is because council prefers that each dwelling has its own access from two different streets. So then it gives this appearance that it's actually two different houses. Obviously having two driveways onto one lot makes it appear more like a duplex. Doesn't mean you won't get it approved. It's just what council prefers. Key difference here as well, which is probably the major thing about the Gold Coast's low density zone as opposed to other areas, is that you can propose a dual occupancy here. And if it's meeting all the requirements of the relevant assessment benchmarks, like your codes and all of those, then you can actually be considered accepted development subject to requirements. So if you guys aren't aware, I know you probably are aware of different types and levels of assessment. It's generally the same throughout Australia, just set in a different way. Queensland, you've got your general 3, which is accepted development, which means you don't need town planning approval from council. Next step up from that is code assessment, easy to get approved, doesn't require, people can't object to it. And then you've got impact assessment, which is the highest, and that requires you to put up signs and put letters in the local newspaper and make your neighbours aware, and they can take you to court and etc. Accepted development obviously is the one you would want because it means you don't need town planning approval. This generally applies to dwelling houses. Obviously you just need a certifier to approve the house in accordance with whatever the local state code is for houses, and you build your house. The Gold Coast City Plan takes that to a next step. So accepted development subject to requirements just means that you can prepare what you would for an application. So you can prepare a set of plans, and then I would essentially review the plans and then assess the application against the outcomes of the relevant codes. And if it's meeting all of them, then I could send a letter to council saying, hey, I would agree that this is accepted development. Would you agree as well? They sign off on it, and then you give that to your certifier to build the dual occupancy rather than going through the rigmarole of council approvals and council DA fees and consultants fees and all that sort of thing. So obviously it saves a lot of time and a lot of money. It is pretty rare to find that. The only reason I say that is because you would need a minimum of 800 square meters for this instance dual occupancy. If you found a corner lot that was 800 square meters and you could purchase it, then you could look at potentially trying to get away with not needing an approval. Obviously, getting a site that large would be a bit harder than a lot of because it's not as abundant. The opportunity is still there to try and get it. If you don't meet those outcomes, you would just default to code assessment, and then you would default to impact if you're not meeting, the height requirements for the zone or the density requirements that exist there as well. It's still, even if you hit impact assessment, I think you'll see through these examples, it doesn't mean that your job is dead, and I'll go into a bit more detail. Something else to note about the zone is that you can do multiple dwellings. Multiple dwelling is 3 or more dwellings on one site. Duplex is 2. Then you move up to multiple dwelling, 3 or more, could be 200. Brisbane City Council does not allow multiple dwellings in the low density residential zone anymore. So there's no provision to do that anymore in Brisbane, whereas the opportunity still exists here. So if you did find potentially a larger site within this zone, there's the opportunity to try and get a set of townhouses on it or something like that. I think in that instance, you're likely going to trigger impact doing that. Again, it doesn't mean that the job is dead. It's very easy to get it justified. It just depends on how you approach it. So the next logical step up for your zoning is the medium density residential zone. So this places a bit more emphasis on your low rise, medium or low medium rise multiple dwellings like apartments and townhouses. These areas on the Gold Coast in particular are generally focused along the coastline where you're near major public transport, centre zones, schools, that sort of thing. Obviously, these areas are much more suited for increases in density, hence the increase in the density of the zone. The interesting thing about the medium density zone here is that because there's no low medium density residential zone, the medium density residential zone here almost acts as both. It's largely driven by the overlays that will apply to the site. The example I've given here on this screen is on the left here, we've got, whoops, you guys can still see it. I think I've gone too far here. On the left-hand side here, we've got all these sites are located within the medium density residential zone. The key outcome or the key difference between them is that the maximum building height for the ones on the right is 29 meters, whereas the maximum building height for the ones on the left is 2 stories and 9 meters with a partial third story. Okay. So obviously that limits the outcome that you can get despite the fact they're still the same zone. And the outcome I've just highlighted with the other 2 images I've got here on the screen. So the one on the left there is a dual occupancy that we got approved in Miami within that 2-story height limit on a small site, whereas the one on the right is a development that was approved in Palm Beach with that 29-meter height limit. So that's an 8-story apartment building, which are very common along that side of the Gold Coast. And this just creates that significant variation. Generally speaking, I guess if you're looking at medium density residential sites and you want to focus on that smaller development, you'd focus on the sites where the height limit's a bit smaller because it still gives you really good outcome. But the sites with that higher building limit are going to be more expensive, obviously. So we're going to delve into the building height overlay that I just explained. So building height on the Gold Coast is governed largely by this overlay. I said before, an overlay is essentially a layer within the city plan that dictates development and your built form outcome in a lot of areas. A lot of overlays can actually trigger development in their own right. Like the flood overlay is a good example. You could have a site that is perfect with everything that floods, therefore you need an approval from council to build on it. This one doesn't trigger development on its own. It will dictate the level of assessment for the development that you propose. So it's shown in a few different ways, which I've got up on the screen here for you. It's either shown in just meters or it's shown in stories and meters. So if it's shown in stories and meters, you need to meet both of those outcomes in order to remain code accessible. So if this one's 3 stories and 15 meters, if I propose 3-story building that was 16 meters tall, it's impact assessment because I'm not meeting both of them. Whereas if I proposed 4 stories and 15 meters, same outcome, it's still impact assessment because it's not 3 stories. So you've got to meet both. Otherwise, there's the other example here, 24 meters on the left there. If you propose within 24 meters, it's code accessible. As soon as it's 24.1 meters, impact accessible. And the large difference on the Gold Coast here, I haven't really seen it anywhere else yet. The Gold Coast in a lot of areas has an unlimited building height limit. I mean, Surfers is a good example. I'm in Surfers right now. Obviously, a lot of large buildings in Surfers and where I've done a lot of my work. There's in no way could you trigger impact assessment in that area just because of the building height. It could be essentially as high as you could try. You'd be limited on your setbacks and all that. I had a 51-story building approved last year. I'm just down the road from where I am now. That was approved in 5 months because of the building height overlay. So it's all about the context, obviously, when you're looking at these sorts of things.
Incredible.
It was a really interesting one as well. I think it worked well because of the people we worked with as well. It's just giving you that context of depends where you are and how your outcome will go. It doesn't mean that you can't get an approval. The low density residential zone is not included in this overlay. It doesn't need to be. It wouldn't anticipate anything more than 2 or 3 stories. What it can do, which again doesn't exist in other LGAs, is that you can propose a partial third story. And a partial third story is just an extra story. It can only be a maximum of 50% of the GFA of the second story. So it's almost just like this extra little story on top. A lot of people here do it for their houses. They get their master bedroom and breakout areas in the very top story and then utilize the rest for the other bedrooms and breakout areas. We see a lot of this outcome with the infill development for those dual occupancies and townhouses because you are essentially getting a 3-story outcome. That's not going to trigger impact assessment. You've just got to make sure that it's not taller than 9 meters. If you can keep it within that 9 meters, then you are getting such a good outcome in terms of the extra GFA for your building, which obviously equates to a more sellable outcome.
Yeah, I love those partial third stories because a lot of people put the rooftop deck, maybe a sauna, a little pool up there. They might do the outdoor cinema screen with some beautiful outdoor furniture. And I think along the coastline, it's a good way of creating that living lifestyle outdoors.
It's important as well, like what you're describing is more almost like a rooftop terrace. The story itself is just talking about the enclosed area. So you would get 50% enclosed area. And if you wanted to expand a little bit in terms of open space, then you could create more open space. It just can't be roofed or enclosed.
Right.
So, because that's not meeting the definition of GFA, which is what a lot of people do. And it's pretty present along a lot of LGAs. Like I know that Brisbane does it. You know, you can propose a rooftop garden, and we do it a lot for our clients there when they're doing apartments. You know, you do a rooftop garden there that meets a certain definition. It doesn't count as a story. It still creates that space. Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, more cost effective to build as well when you're not fully enclosing.
Yes, exactly.
So it's all about what the client wants.
Next overlay that's very relevant here, I've touched on it briefly. It's the residential density overlay. And this essentially is identifying sites that are more suitable for that increased density. And the density we're referring to is either increases in bedrooms or increases in total dwellings per lot. What you would want to focus on is anything with RD1 up to RD8, because generally speaking, it does show which areas would increase in density. It also acts as a almost like gatekeeping certain low density sites so that they can't be increased in density. So see on the top right here, it's just this key legend showing you the different categories within the overlay, and the top two are LDR1 and LDR2. You would only ever see those in low density. It's not super common. Essentially, it's just trying to make sure that people don't overdevelop that. So if you are looking for low density residential sites within that overlays, which council wants to increase the density, you're looking at RD1 upwards. Obviously, like the further up you go, the more likely the zone's going to be higher. So you likely wouldn't see a low density res other than RD1 and RD2. Medium densities within RD2 up to RD5, and then high density is a bit higher than that. And that's kind of illustrated on the image here. This is just the overlay as it's shown in Burleigh Heads. So closer to the beach side there, you've got the high density residential, which is a higher density outcome. And the further you get back, it's medium and then low. Something to be aware of in terms of medium density and high density is that you can't trigger impact assessment because of the density that you propose. You can only trigger impact assessment because of the density you propose in low density residential. That's the key difference. Probably why medium density is more desirable than low density is because of those triggers. That being said, like I don't think I've ever done a project on the Gold Coast where we've exceeded the density outcome and I've not had it approved in medium and high density, because essentially every single time you propose something, it's going to exceed it. The one I did in Surfers, that 50-story one, it was 280 dwellings. I think it was supposed to be one bed per 200 or one bed per 25 square meters. Ours was like one bed per 12 or something like that, and council still approved it. It's just a matter of showing that the infrastructure's there to accommodate it. And like, it's probably more so a flag for the low density residential sites, because that's where you'll trigger your impact assessment. Again, it's like, it doesn't mean that the project is dead in the water. It's just about justifying the rest of the project, which is easy enough to do, in my opinion. The overlay also dictates your minimum lot sizes if you're looking to subdivide. Another key difference here about this overlay is that the way that it works, it actually creates the possibility of very small lots on the Gold Coast. If I go back, that top left there is a medium density site in Burleigh Heads. I actually had to go and look at it because I didn't believe it when I first saw it. That was a 500 square meter lot that a guy subdivided into two 250 square meter lots and then built two houses on it. And obviously they're small houses. They're very in demand purely because of the location. Like Burleigh Heads, I think at one point, it might still even be, it was the most sought after property in all of Australia at some point. Like it was just unreal, the amount. And like Burleigh Heads now, like as I explained before, it has the most expensive apartment ever in Queensland. Like, it's just very hot property. So people are taking the opportunities where they come. And this guy's done it and subdivided his old house into two lots and built new houses on them and made a profit. And it's
Josh, I've been told Burleigh Heads is like the new Bondi in Sydney. More affordable.
I would agree with that. It is very expensive. It is very expensive. I think you're looking at Burleigh Heads in terms of like the actual headland, like right near the beach. Yes, you can move out a bit further in Burleigh waters and it gets a bit more affordable. It's just where you
like range. It's not like all high. Like you go in, you can still buy, a townhouse for $1 million.
Yeah, probably even a house. Yeah. And it's purely just because as soon as they put the light rail in as well, like the light rail is being built right now and it's running, the next stage will be completed next year and that finishes in Burleigh. So where you're within 400 meters of a light rail station, your property value is definitely going to go up. Like, I told you last time, I bought my apartment on the Gold Coast in Mermaid Beach purely because the new light rail stop is literally 50 meters away from where it is near the beach. And I knew it was coming in, may have cheated a bit because I knew where it was going because I spoke to the state government. It's as soon as that infrastructure comes in, it makes things more expensive. So you're trying to get in before all that happens, I guess.
Yes,
it's just because
historical. It's just common sense, anywhere near infrastructure, trains, shops.
sitting within walking distance, essentially. Like if you can walk everywhere, it makes it much more affordable. So like the problem with the Gold Coast at the moment is that their north-south public transport's quite good, and it will be quite good. Their east-west isn't very good. So like you push further out to the east, or to the west at the moment, it's more affordable. It's very likely that public transport will be improved within the next 10 or so years because they just have to with all the people coming in. So I think it would increase eventually, and it won't be as expensive as Burleigh is now, I suppose.
Yes. So there's a lot of areas that aren't as expensive as Burleigh that has that potential all around it, the gentrification.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Following the line, like you said, from Crawley to Burleigh, I think that's where it stops, isn't it? Is that real growth area that be developable?
Yeah. I mean, there's other sporadically placed residential areas that would work. You just want to look at places that are within that walking distance of like local centres and stuff, because the more walkable, the more accessible, the more permeable a suburb, the more expensive it will likely be.
Amazing. Okay, so I hope you guys are all taking notes here. It's all recorded, so you can rewatch it later. I know it's a lot of factual stuff, a lot to take in. It's good info. Loving it.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of dumping. Hopefully everyone's following along. I think what I'll do now, I think it's always the best way to help you kind of understand a bit easier is just showing you some examples of developments that we've got approved.
We love case studies. These are real life. Talk about when this was done. Was it last year or this year?
Yeah. I'll have all that info. But so these following outcomes was things that we've had approved. I'll preface this by saying that the way that Queensland works is that it's all performance-based, right? That's how the planning schemes work here. Each site is assessed on its own merits. So like that is essentially saying like, just because someone else did it doesn't mean you get the exact same outcome. It is always a very good indication of what you can get with something that's very similar. So that's why we show these outcomes. So this one in particular, this is a due occupancy that we got approved in 2022 in Miami. With a 506 square meter site with a 12.5 meter frontage. And to put that into perspective, generally speaking, if you want to meet the acceptable outcome for frontage at 20 meters for due occupancy, you can get a much smaller outcome approved on a very small site, purely based on the context of the sites. The context of this site, it's medium density residential zone, can't be triggered impact because of the density, only can be triggered impact due to the height. So we proposed 2 stories. It was in the 2-story partial third maximum. Despite the reduced frontage and site area, this development was approved really quickly. I think it was 4 or 5 months we had this approved, and it probably would have been a bit quicker. Council were just a bit slow. They were just kind of caught up with some other more important stuff, which was a bit frustrating because we wanted to try and see how quickly we could get it done. 5 months is still pretty quick for this code accessible. This is just an example, a very good example of like that medium density site that's in the lower height area that council just expects to see this. So you're going to get the outcome pretty quickly if you stay within the outcomes of the codes and all of that.
So with that one, you didn't have to go through neighbour notification, box drops. If someone complained next door, they can't have, I guess, a right to say it because it's medium density.
Yeah. So the key difference there, obviously, between code and impact is impact requires public notification, and there's some caveats to public notification. The main one being third-party appeal rights. So what that means is once let's say you have an impact accessible application, you put up signs and someone objects to it, they make a properly made objection. So that in that 15-day window in which they can make an objection, they make a properly made objection. They bring up some key aspects. Oh, I don't agree with the density. I don't agree with the height or whatever. That's fine. Council doesn't need to consider that. And let's assume you go ahead and you get approved. Right after your approval, there's a 20-day period, which is an appeal rights period. So this 20-day period gives any properly made submitter the right to take you to court over council's decision, right? This famously happened in Palm Beach last year. Very big developer got a 14-story building approved in Palm Beach. Maximum height limit there is about 9 stories. There are provisions within the city plan, which I can go through later if you'd like, where you can increase your building height by 50%. You've just got to meet these certain outcomes within the city plan. And council's opinion was that they did meet those outcomes. They're all qualitative, it's just weird descriptions. And I think they had about 2,000 objections from all the neighbors. So a lot of people in Palm Beach are quite opposed to it, those larger developments. So they had a lot of objections. And what happened to them was that after they got it approved, within that 20-day period, the entire apartment block next to them all joined together and took them to court over this. And ultimately, they won and had the decision overturned. So that developer had his approval, and then it was ultimately refused. And now he's gone back and not had to knock off like 4 stories to get it approved again. Those are very important because where something is approved in court almost can change how people approach development completely. It gives precedence in the future for other developments. So, I think developers would know like not to go in that particular part of Palm Beach because they'll likely be taken to court and they'll probably lose. These smaller developments, you don't see that very often because, it's probably just the couple next door that might disapprove, and they're probably not going to take you to court for hundreds of thousands of dollars just to try and get a due occupancy refused in council. I think you probably lose that case in court if council decides to approve that. That could have happened in this case. This was a due occupancy that I did in Miami. This was low density residential zone, so it triggered impact assessment purely because of the proposed density. This defaulted to 1 dwelling per 400 square meters because it wasn't in that density overlay. It was on a corner site, right? So it had 2 frontages. So that's why council would consider it in the first place. I think you'll see the surrounding context here makes it a bit clearer why it's probably suited to this.
Across the road.
Exactly. So that instance also, if you look around the site here, when it's saying achieving that dispersed scattered effect for a due occupancy or multiple dwelling, it's referring to other areas in the low density residential zone, not anything else in a different zone. So it's very clear on this image that there are no existing due occupancies, there are no existing multiple dwellings anywhere near this site, right? Other than those in the medium density. So by default, we're already achieving that scattered effect, which was our justification to council. And then council ultimately said, yes, that's a very good point. You've got that corner site. You're right across from medium density. The context in which the site sits makes it very clear that this is suitable. And that's where it comes back to that, assessing the site on its own merits. So I think this is probably the best example of like looking at that kind of ideal site. Like this is a small site really in the grand scheme of things. It's less than 600 square meters. We couldn't actually get the site access for the cars on the 2 different frontages because the frontage facing Albion Avenue there is really small. And and there was like a power pole there. So we couldn't do it physically. Council was still willing to listen. So we had the 2 driveways coming in on the same frontage near that roundabout. And ultimately council were fine with it. And then we actually went back after we got it approved. We went back again and did a change application to increase the GFA slightly. Decreased the setbacks a little bit, made some of the bedrooms a bit bigger. Nothing crazy. Council was still on board with it. So a better outcome. I think none of these actually for sale at the moment. I thought I saw it online.
Would it make a difference, Josh, if you were in the street behind it on the map, like on that Gay's parade on those 2 corner blocks?
Yeah.
Because they're further back from the medium density and just say they were similar land size at 5 under 600, would that be on its merit again based on getting the 2 street frontages?
Yeah. So again, like your first thought there is, well, they're both corner lots. So in the first instance, that's what council's looking for. You'd want to propose your site access from the 2 different streets. Again, like this is a good example because apart from that one that's been approved, there aren't any others in the area. So you could still argue that you're achieving that gentle scattered effect. And you are again also still in proximity to the medium density. Again, it does come down to like the separate assessment, the different application. With these areas that don't have these high concentrations of dual occupancies, I think it's pretty clear that you could get a good outcome. I would also argue, I think we did, if you see all the sites that run to the left up Albion Avenue next to our site, those are all 400 square meter blocks, 405 square meter blocks. So you could argue that the context is that the dwelling density is probably a bit lower because the existing character is these houses on smaller blocks. So we're essentially maintaining the character of the area because it's got these smaller, skinnier blocks. again, it all comes down to your context when you're looking at this. I'd be pretty confident in doing another DA around these areas because I've seen it before. Yeah, in the first instance, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have those approvals of similar blocks close by. You can't count on them.
No, that's right. Like in certain instances, it's a really good argument to say that it's occurred all over the place near you, whereas others, it's actually detrimental. Like we had that happen on a dual occupancy we did a couple of years ago when I was at Urbis, and we proposed this. So like it was the same situation. It was one dual occupancy in this vast area of low density residential where there had none previously. Like there's just none left. And this guy objected to it. And his objection was based on the facts. He was like, well, I can now do, like, this is going to set precedence and I'm going to be able to do this on every single block on my street. And he showed a dual occupancy he'd drawn on every single block. And it was the easiest argument for me to make, being like, that would not be approved because it's not in accordance with the zone. And I think it was like one paragraph I sent back to council saying that's ridiculous. Like, well, you know that this can't happen because you would never approve that because it's not on a corner block and you wouldn't be achieving the scattered effect. And you can't justify development based on the fact that your neighbour did it. That's not how it works in Queensland. So it was a very easy argument to make. And that's why it was approved. So again, it comes down to that context. Like, what's the context? That ultimately becomes your justification.
Would you do like a pre-lodgement with council before you definitely go ahead with buying the block? Would that help? Or
I guess it depends on the block. It is a really good indication. I think the only thing I'd say about pre-lodgement in Queensland in particular, it's that council's not bound by what they say in a pre-lodgement meeting. It's not an approval is what I essentially like. I think it would be a good thing to do if there's probably a couple of other dual occupancies that have been approved or built. You're probably going to have to justify that argument of achieving that scattered effect a little bit more. So you could come up with a good design and then present that to council because they need this like minimum amount of information in order to do a pre-lodgement. You need to give them a set of plans with elevations and floor plans showing setbacks and all that sort of thing. And then I have to write a letter to them as well explaining why it should be approved. So there's instances where I'd say, well, let's not do that because I'm pretty confident that we can get it. Whereas I think if this exact outcome was done again, a couple of, dual occupancies were approved on these other corner lots nearby, then I'd probably go to council and say, would you support this? To then to give you that, justification on purchasing and moving forward.
Yep. The more precedents, the better. And I think as developers going in, we want a surety. It's not.
Yeah. We do that a lot for our larger developers. Obviously, like I just did one a couple of weeks ago for the guys we got that approval in Burleigh heads for, and they're looking to purchase the site and they had put an offer in, but they have their due diligence period. So in that due diligence period is when they get us to prepare pre-lodgement, and then we go and speak to council about the design they've got just to see what council thinks. And it is usually a very good indication of council and how they approach things, because in that meeting we were able to understand, like, we like this and this, but we don't like that. So maybe just improve that a little bit more, and then they can go back and create a better outcome so that when we do eventually lodge it, it's probably going to reduce the amount of time spent council assessing it and get the approval a bit faster.
Yeah, we love that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. They're really two good examples. And obviously, like you said, each property will be on its own merit. But we are seeing lots of people. The more case studies, the more that you guys can see what's happening out there. Save these addresses, look around the similar areas. The agents are pretty savvy these days too, I find.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. They all do the same thing down the Gold Coast as well. There's a couple that are quite prominent that just, they come to us as well for advice before they sell stuff. So yeah, it's pretty easy to find something good. Next up here, I have touched on these throughout the presentation, but I thought I'd just kind of emphasize them at the end, is these key differences between the Gold Coast and Brisbane. I'm saying Brisbane, but it applies to a lot of different LGAs in Southeast Queensland. So first and foremost, we don't have a low medium density residential zone here. So it's just automatically creates more opportunities for development within that low density residential zone, because it has to cater for that extra gentle density that now the shaping SEQ requires. And further to that, you're allowed to do multiple dwellings in low density residential here because of that. So whereas you're not allowed to do it in Brisbane, so there's more opportunity there. If you have a larger site, you could probably try and get more than 2 dwellings on it. You've got that ability to have a third story that's partial, that doesn't trigger impact assessment, which obviously makes it a bit more, you can get more money out of selling it as long as you meet that definition and are trying to keep it under 9 meters to keep that code accessible. Doesn't mean you can't get it approved at impact, but what we're looking for is that 9 meters. This is a big one as well. There's no neighborhood plans on the Gold Coast. I don't know how exactly this is probably treated around Australia, but the way that neighborhood plans work within Queensland is the neighborhood plan is essentially like a mini planning scheme that can apply to a suburb or group of suburbs that, when applied, is that first point of call to see like what development can be done within that area. So when I'm looking as a planner, like what the level of assessment's going to be, and I know there's a neighborhood plan, I don't go to the zone straight away to check out what the assessment's going to be. I have to go to the neighborhood plan because of the hierarchy of how it works. And the neighborhood plan, you could have one that greatly increases your opportunity for development, but in contrast, you could have one that really limits it. You could have a high density residential site that in all other cases could be 20 stories, but this neighborhood plan says, no, we limit it to 10. So you have to do it that way. And that there are so many neighborhood plans in Brisbane, like too many to count. So, and some of them have really exacerbating constraints to them, whereas on the Gold Coast, there are none. They used to have them and they got rid of all of them. I don't know why, but now the only real trigger for development is it's all determined by the overlays and the zoning. So, there are people in Palm Beach who are quite opposed to development and will probably love a neighborhood plan to stop development there, but it doesn't exist. So you treat it the same way you would a medium density site, any other suburb on the Gold Coast. Another key thing here is that there's no traditional building character overlay. There's no heritage down here. There's no pre-1911 overlays. These exist in a lot of LGAs, just explained in a different way. But essentially, these are like protected houses. In Brisbane, any house that is built prior to 1947, like your Queenslanders, are just automatically protected by this overlay. To the point where even if you bought the site and wanted to just demolish the house just to build your new house, you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to keep the house. You could partially demolish it, that sort of thing. Does not exist here. There's only, I think, 3 heritage listed sites in all of Queensland, and 2 of them have been developed already. So that's a real, I even forgot about it. Like when I went back to urban strategies and started doing Brisbane work again, I totally forgot this overlay existed and thought, oh God, now I've got to do this extra work of checking whether or not they can actually knock their house down. But down here, not something I even think about. I didn't even think about it. Buy a piece of land and knock the house down and worry about what you're going to build on it.
And it's huge across Australia, that overlay, especially in a lot of, Gold Coast is probably a newer city, I guess, but Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, you got these beautiful old heritage Victorian style Federation and can develop on some of them. Some of them make you keep the frontage.
Yeah.
And the back will be completely modern.
Yeah.
So
same.
Interesting ways to get around it, I must say. They look, patchy, but a good designer will make them look really good. So you can always find a way if it's a good site.
Yeah. I mean, it's much more expensive to have to keep a traditional building because in Brisbane particular, they make you move it to the front of the site. Like we have a lot of examples of people who bought these big sites with old houses on them. They've built townhouses on it, but they've had to like pick the house up and move it forward and put it back down at the front of the house and then have all the townhouses behind it, which is really expensive. Whereas here, it's just like, just knock it down, blow it up. I don't care. Just get rid of it.
It's much easier. I just love that too.
Another key thing here is the sites here aren't limited based on their size in terms of how high you can go. In Brisbane, for example, you can have a high density residential zoned site that has like a 15-story height limit. But if it's only 800 square meters, the city plan will like take you down immediately to 8-story maximum. Whereas here, that doesn't exist. I've had an example. I got an approval just down the road there on Garfield Terrace, 600 square meter site, and we got 28 stories approved on it. So very skinny building, but it works. Ultimately, I think it drives really interesting architectural designs as a result. I think Hayden's one of my directors here at Urban Strategies. He got an approval in Main Beach for a tower on a 405 square meter block. There is a lot of more opportunity here in terms of how high you can go because of that. I mean, hopefully they don't remove it, but it makes it much more easy to develop these individual lots rather than waiting to collate and put lots together. Target sites for you guys. So this is more what I focus on getting for you, being in that smaller range. You're looking at buying some low density or medium density and putting some dual occupancies on it. Your ideal site would obviously be a medium density residential, as I've described it. Very rare that you'll trigger the impact assessment, unless you're going over that building height limit, you can't trigger it for the density. So, and that's usually what council are looking for, is to maintain the density. Your low density sites are still an option and can be very desirable. You're just looking at a few things. You're looking at the sites with 2 frontages on them, so your corner sites. You're looking at sites that don't have, even if they're not corner lots, if they're located within that residential zone category of RD1 or more, they are desirable for you as well. And then you got to look at like the broader context. How many other geographies are located nearby? How close am I to the medium density residential zone or high density residential zones to give that justification of increasing the density where it makes sense? And you've got to make sure, am I keeping that scattered effect? Like, I think that's probably the main one, because it's more likely that you'll have a site in low density that's surrounded by other low density sites. So that's what we want to look at in the first instance.
Good points. Really, really good points. And there are plenty of sites out there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's actually a lot going on down here on the Gold Coast. Like I said, that Mermaid Beach down to Coolangatta, there's so many opportunities for those kind of older houses that have kind of just been sitting there for the last 50 years. And I think when that implementation of the new city plan really made it clear that that's what they want. I think that's what you need to start looking at. Here, I think from my experience with a lot of your students, Amy, is that they really enjoy the presentations, but they also want to see like what the outcome can be and like what's the investment kind of turn into. So I added this one for you guys. I did some research myself. Obviously, being a planner, I have access to a couple of websites and things that you guys don't have access to. One of them being one that can show me how much land sold for. It's historical land sale purchase. So I thought this would be an interesting one for you guys to have a look at. So these are just a couple of examples of sales that I had a look at just randomly around the Gold Coast, Palm Beach, and these areas that I thought you should focus on. So this is an example of a dual occupancy that was built a couple of years ago, 600 square meter block, that very standard what you look at in medium density. Each one of these units ended up selling, I think, for over 1.7 million. The DA was approved within about 6 months. And the site at the time, I think, sold for like 1.2 or something like that. So it is a pretty good outcome for you guys looking at these ones. Next one I thought was a very good outcome as well. So this is that example of like a really small site that you wouldn't typically think a dual occupancy would be put on. But 405 square meters in Miami. So this is not far from where I live, actually. So I went down and had a look at it. And it's, that bit more of a modern design, which people are looking for a bit now more on the Gold Coast, I would say. Like, I think most of the stuff you see down here is that beachy, modern, white.
Yep.
And these guys, you see, they utilize that partial third story to create more of like a breakout bedroom, master bedroom sort of thing. And again, each one of these units sold for 1.7 million. Over that, I think.
It almost one big house, but
yeah, exactly.
Adjoining wall, shared driveway, isn't it?
So like, the built form outcome you see actually isn't that different to what is around in the area, but the sellability obviously increases drastically when you increase the density. This is the last one I thought I'd show you. I thought this was just interesting because they've gone for this detached sort of outcome. Usually you'd see like an attached style dual occupancy around the Gold Coast. They've gone for this detached one, which presents it more as like 2 houses.
Looks much better.
Yeah. So this one, again, very quick DA process, medium density. So I think it took like 4 or 5 months for them to get the approval. But I was able to find the history on this one, and the guy bought the site for 1.3. Obviously put a lot into the actual design, probably spent a bit on the actual outcome in terms of these 2 houses, but each unit sold for more than 2 million, I think, which is quite an amazing outcome. And like, these are the sites that are like quite abundant on the Gold Coast at the moment. Yeah,
it's a really clever design for that one, in the fact that they had the shared driveway, but it's still separated in the middle. So, and it's completely different design. Actually, I've done a couple of those in Brisbane on those smaller 600 square meter blocks close to the shops and railway. And very clever at designing for small spaces. For those of you who live in inner city of Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, the big cities, you can build amazing design and houses on tiny 200 square meter blocks. The best design we've done is on a 120 square meter block, 4.5 meter frontage in Enmore in Sydney, for those who've seen some of our examples. And we built a 3-level house, freestanding, with 4 bedroom, 3 bathroom. And It's massive. It's 250 square meters inside, I'd say. And you could fit
It's an
family.
interesting outcome. If you think about it, like that's what someone would have in an apartment if they were to, buy a 3 or 4 bedroom apartment, but they have the added benefit of actually owning the land that it's on. They're not part of the body corporate. And like anyone here is part of a body corporate, they suck. Like body corporate.
There's no body corporate, no strata. And it's just, when you're living in those big cities, like if you look at other countries, Tokyo, New York, you can do amazing things on books as long as you've got that density. And people pay premium because of the walking distance to the shops or transport or just generally.
You could get in medium density. Yeah, for sure. You could get that outcome.
So I feel like if you can adopt some of those designs from interstate cities and bring them into, your Gold Coast or Brisbane design, you're going to get much more of a, strategic, a smart design. And that's what a Gold Coast will become, a little city.
Well, like Gold Coast is the 6th or 5th biggest city in Australia, and I think it's the fastest growing. So when I was at Urbis, we had an economics team at Urbis, and one of the head economists, she would constantly do these presentations they had this factor, I can't remember what it was called, but it essentially grades different cities on their growth and ability and their status. And the Gold Coast's score on this level was higher than that in New York. It was higher than London.
Wow.
They kind of hit their peak and really can't expand anymore. Whereas the Gold Coast was seen as this perfect opportunity to create one of those cities. It would almost be like an LA, near the beach.
Yeah. Yeah. Lifestyle city, which has got everything. And it's still affordable compared to the big cities. Somebody did tell me it is going to be moving faster than Brisbane as well. What are your thoughts?
I would agree with that. Brisbane's pretty limited. Like, obviously, there's a lot going on in Brisbane. It's a very big area. Brisbane, LG area, I think, is like the 2nd biggest in the world or something like that. It gets limited on its development because of all those overlays that affect existing housing. So you automatically reduce the net area of availability. Whereas the Gold Coast is like, we got to find anywhere we can get essentially and capitalize on it.
And it just feels easier from, what we've seen, students doing deals that the council is very pro with developers because you've got to meet that demand or that population growth.
Yeah.
Which makes it a bit more enjoyable journey, I must say. Amazing. Thank you very much, Josh. And thank you everybody for coming on today. We'll see you again very soon on one of our next Think Property webinars. Thanks, guys.